You're not stuck because you're weak. You're not stuck because you've made too many mistakes. You're stuck because you believe you shouldn't be stuck. Alan Watts once said, "Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone." But everything in the modern world teaches us the opposite. That discomfort is a problem. That stillness is laziness. That uncertainty must be eliminated. So you try harder, push more, fix faster. But what if the very effort to escape the mud is what keeps you sinking in it? Most people aren't stuck in life. They're stuck in resistance, a subtle war between what is and what they think should be, between their present moment and their imagined one. Watts called this the great confusion of the ego, the illusion that we are separate from life, that we are the doer, the controller, the one in charge. So when things feel off, the ego tightens its grip. It scrambles for answers. It manufactures urgency. It says, "I have to figure this out right now." But life doesn't respond to force. It responds to flow, like trying to untangle a necklace. The harder you pull on the knot, the tighter it becomes. But the moment you pause, breathe, loosen your hands, you notice something. The knot begins to soften on its own. You think you need more motivation. You think you need more clarity. But maybe what you need is less interference, less noise, less chasing. Because stuckness isn't always a punishment. Sometimes it's a cocoon, a sacred in-between, not who you were, not yet who you'll become. And if you try to rush that process, you don't become free. You become frantic. The truth is, you don't figure out life. You remember how to live it, not from your mind, but from presence, from listening, from realizing you were never separate from it in the first place. So if you feel stuck, ask yourself, what am I trying to outrun? What silence am I afraid to sit in? What would happen if I stopped trying to fix this moment and simply felt it? That's where the shift begins. And if something inside you softened while hearing this, then you're not alone. Click subscribe, not for noise, but for clarity, not for answers, but for remembrance. Let's go deeper. What you call stuck is often a signal. You think your life has stopped, but maybe it's just speaking in a language you were never taught to hear. Alan Watts often described life as a dance, not a problem to solve, but a rhythm to move with. So what if this silence, this stall, this stuck feeling isn't failure, but invitation? Most people ask, how do I get out of this? But rarely do they ask, what is this moment asking of me? Because stuck isn't always a lack of movement. Sometimes it's a lack of alignment. You're forcing yourself down paths that your soul has no interest in walking. You're doing what you think you should do, not what you feel called to do. You obey the calendar. You chase the paycheck. You mimic the success stories, and then wonder why everything feels heavy. Watts would tell you, the river doesn't need permission to bend. The tree doesn't ask before shedding its leaves. They simply follow their nature. But you've been taught to doubt your own, so you suppress the inner nudge. You silence the discomfort. You call it laziness. You call it depression, when in truth, it might just be misdirection. You're not failing. You're misaligned, and life, in its wisdom, is stalling you until you listen, not because it's cruel, but because it knows what you forgot, that your path isn't found through force. It's remembered through stillness. You don't break through by sprinting harder. You break through by finally stopping long enough to hear what your deeper self has been whispering. Maybe it's been saying, this isn't your dream. This isn't your path. This isn't your pace. And if you ignore that, life doesn't punish you. It pauses you until you remember who you are beneath the noise. So what if the reason you feel stuck is because you're finally too awake to lie to yourself? What if this block is actually a doorway, not back into old habits, but forward into your real direction? Stuckness is a symptom of self-abandonment. The question isn't, how do I get unstuck? It's, where did I lose myself? Because the truth is, you weren't always this lost. There was a time you moved with ease, a time when you followed joy, not pressure, curiosity, not comparison. But then, something shifted. You started trading your truth for approval. You began measuring your worth by productivity, by progress, by how useful you were to people who never asked what you needed in return. You didn't get stuck overnight. You got stuck one compromise at a time, one ignored intuition, one yes you didn't mean, one moment where you abandoned yourself to keep the peace. And now, your soul is exhausted, not because you've done too little, but because you've ignored too much. Alan Watts said, "You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago." Yet, here you are, trying to keep up a version of you that no longer fits. The job that drains you, the relationship that stifles you, the habits that numb you, and the moment you question them, fear rushes in. Because if you let go of what's familiar, what's left? That's why most people stay stuck. Not because they can't change, but because they fear who they'll be without the old identity. But Watts would say, that fear is your freedom trying to be born. Because what's on the other side of stuck isn't always clarity. It's space. Space to feel, to grieve, to unravel, to listen. You have to be willing to fall apart before something truer can come together. And no, that's not easy. It requires you to feel the weight you've avoided, to look at the life you've built, and admit this doesn't fit anymore. But the moment you do, you reclaim your power, because now you're honest, and honesty is the foundation of movement. Not hustle, not hype, not more noise, but truth, raw, uncomfortable, liberating truth. So, if you're feeling stuck, don't rush to fix it. Sit with it, let it speak, and ask yourself, what part of me have I silenced in order to survive? Because that part, that quiet voice you buried, might just be the one that knows exactly where you're meant to go next. You can't get unstuck by thinking harder. Let's clear something up. You will not outthink your way out of this, because what you're experiencing isn't a problem of logic. It's a problem of presence. Alan Watts would say, muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. But here you are, stirring it, fixing it, trying to make sense of it all, before you feel safe enough to act. And that's the trap. You're waiting for the map before you take the first step. But life doesn't give maps. It gives nudges, whispers, subtle signs, inner tugs that say, this way. But those whispers, they don't shout over the noise you keep feeding. The scrolling, the planning, the podcasts, the endless attempts to figure it out. What if clarity isn't a download, but a byproduct of you becoming still enough to hear what's always been there? Because stuckness, in many cases, is a lack of spiritual attunement. You're trying to apply worldly logic to something deeply metaphysical. Watts would remind you, life is not a machine. It's a mystery, and mysteries aren't solved, they're entered. So maybe the path forward isn't linear. Maybe it's not about forward at all. Maybe it's downward, inward, deeper, into the grief you skipped, the dreams you shelved, the truths you've been afraid to admit. You keep asking, what's my purpose? But what if purpose isn't something you find? It's something you uncover by removing everything that's not yours, the roles you didn't choose, the expectations you inherited, the noise you confused for guidance. And when you remove those layers, you don't figure out your life, you remember it. You remember what made you feel alive before the world told you it was stupid. You remember what lit you up before anxiety became your default. You remember that your life doesn't need to look like anyone else's to be worthy. And suddenly, the stuckness softens, not because you forced a breakthrough, but because you've created the space for truth to return. So, no, you don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need another guru's morning routine. You don't need to crush your goals. You need to listen to that small, persistent part of you that's been whispering all along. You're not lost. You're just finally tired of pretending. The art of surrender is the end of resistance. The greatest lie you've been sold is that life rewards the ones who try the hardest. But Watts would say, the river doesn't reward the swimmer who fights the current. It carries the one who trusts the flow. And right now, you're paddling upstream, exhausted, burned out, disoriented, because your ego told you that if you just worked harder, thought harder, controlled better, you could force your way to peace. But peace isn't a prize, it's a pathway, and you can't walk it while gripping control with white-knuckled fear. Here's what they don't teach you. Letting go is not weakness, it's intelligence, it's strength. Because to let go, you must trust something deeper than your mind. You must surrender to a force you cannot predict, or prove, or package into a 7-step formula. You must surrender to life itself, not as a passive victim, but as an active participant who finally understands that you are not separate from the whole. And if life is the river, then trying to control it is like yelling at water to move faster. It doesn't work. It only creates more suffering. Watts would ask, what if being stuck isn't a detour, but the very initiation you've been avoiding? What if this pause, this frustration, this fog is your invitation to remember that the real journey is inward? Because the only thing ever truly stuck is the idea that you need to be somewhere else, to be enough. You don't. Your life is not behind. You are not late. You haven't missed your shot. You are simply being called inward, to sit, to feel, to re-meet yourself. Because the version of you that feels stuck is not broken. She's waiting. He's waiting. They're waiting for you to stop escaping, stop fixing, stop performing, and finally, just be here. Be with the discomfort, with the doubt, with the tension that you've avoided. Because when you stop running from your life, you realize you've been on the path the whole time. You were never off track, just off center. But now, you're home again. The exit is not a door, it's a realization. You've spent years looking for the exit, the one idea, the one answer, the one person, the one opportunity that would finally release you from the feeling of being behind, being lost, being stuck. But what if the exit you seek isn't a door you walk through? It's a realization that you don't need to run anymore. Watts often said, muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone, not by solving it, not by thinking harder, but by stillness. Right now, your stuckness isn't a punishment. It's an invitation to finally let the mud settle, to stop reaching, to stop pretending you need to become something new in order to be valuable. Because truthfully, what you're looking for is not forward. It's not somewhere out there. It's already within you. It always has been. The clarity, the courage, the peace, the purpose. They're not rewards for achieving more. They're fruits of remembering that you were never broken, only buried beneath belief systems that said you had to earn your existence. But Alan Watts would laugh at that. He'd say, you are the universe experiencing itself. What more permission could you possibly need? So breathe. You're not lost. You're layered, and as each false identity falls away, the stuckness starts to dissolve, not with effort, but with awareness, with presence, with the simple choice to stop swimming against your own soul. You were not meant to push your way through life. You were meant to remember. The river moves. When you stop thrashing, let go, trust the current, and meet the version of you that was never stuck, only still. And now, finally, ready? If this resonated, take a moment to subscribe, drop a comment below, not for the algorithm, but to mark this chapter in your journey. If you made it this far, you're not just watching, you're remembering, returning, reclaiming your inner ground. So trust that the video YouTube shows you next, the one appearing now, is not random. It's the next doorway, the next layer, and it will meet you exactly where you are. We'll see you in the next depth. Depthoria continues.